Good evening and welcome to the world today. We have across the Atlantic with us Cinzia Arruzza, who teaches philosophy at the New School and has been extremely active in Italian politics as an activist and is currently extremely active in the United States as one of the organizers of the International Women's Strike projected for March the 8th, International Women's Day. Cinzia, welcome. Very good to have you with us. And tell me first about how did the idea of a women's strike arise, and an international women's strike against the government of the United States?
Yes, so first of all, we didn't call the International Women's Strike in the United States, in the sense that this initiative already existed, and it was launched by especially Polish activists and Argentinian activists after the incredible wave of women's protest both in Poland and Argentina. So what happened is that in the last fall, we had the first an enormous women's strike in Poland against the abortion ban.
Yes, which was a huge success.
It was a success, yeah. And then we also had a wave of women's strikes and mass demonstrations in Argentina against male violence. So starting from the success of these mobilizations, then especially Polish activists had the idea of launching an international women's strike on March 8th. And so when I wrote the statement together with other colleagues and activists like Nancy Fraser or Titi Bhattacharya, Angela Davis, and so on, we thought that it was possible to join this international initiative precisely because we saw that on January 21st, millions of people actually took to the streets against Trump in the women's marches. So we thought that there were the conditions in the United States to have a women's strike, and we joined this international movement.
Well, that's very positive, actually, that it actually started from outside the United States and has now come here. But tell me something, what has the response been so far? I mean, how many people do you think will come out?
So the response has been wonderful, taking into account that we came to the idea of launching an international women's strike here in the States only at the end of January. So we are running against time to organize the strike. And we created a national coalition, International Women's Strike US. But this was done really within 3 weeks. So it was really an enormous activist, militant effort. And the response has been wonderful. So at the moment we have already 40 different events planned in different cities in the United States. We think that we may have a big turnout at the rally and march in New York, because what is distinctive of this coalition is the fact that contrary to other movements in the States, we are really a coalition, in the sense that we created a network of already existing groups, feminist groups, labor organizations, immigrants groups, pro-Palestine groups, and that are working together. But we are also giving visibility to all these groups, because our idea is that the coalition should also serve the purpose of giving a voice and visibility to the various political and social forces that are contributing. And for example, recently, 2 days ago, even the New York Nurses Association announced that they will join the strike and come to the rally and march. So I don't think they can stage a strike in the workplace, but certainly they will mobilize for the rally and march. So this is steadily growing, let's say.
And Cinzia, what is the main demand of the strike? I mean, in Poland, when the women marched, in Argentina, when the women marched, they had one big demand. And, you know, subsidiary ones too, but the main demand was very clear. And in Poland, they won it. The government retreated. So what is the big demand on the strikes in the United States?
So we have a national platform that has a set of points. So we were also inspired by the Argentinian coalition, Ni Una Menos, which produced a document for the strike clarifying that the strike is against violence, but violence against women. But violence against women must be understood not only as interpersonal male violence or domestic violence, but also as state violence, for example, through immigration policies or colonial war, internal colonization, and also economic violence. So we have a platform that articulates all these aspects. And among the important demands, first of all, of course, we are in opposition to the Muslim ban and to the Trump's administration policies on immigration. We are demanding universal health care and free abortion, so access to free abortion, or also access to healthcare services for women who actually do want to have children, because as you know, in this country we also have a history of forced sterilization of women of color. So reproductive rights doesn't mean just abortion, it means also the right to have a child. We are also striking in solidarity with Palestine and for the decolonization of Palestine, and we have several pro-Palestine groups participating in the strike. But what we want to also emphasize is the fact that we are striking clearly against Trump. Trump is a danger, and we want to give a very strong signal to this administration, both concerning its policies on women's rights, its policies on immigration, its foreign policies, Standing Rock. So we are clearly in solidarity with Standing Rock and so on. But we also want to emphasize the fact that the problems of women, and especially working class women, women of color, migrant women in the United States, didn't start with Trump. They started well before Trump. These years of both austerity, neoliberalism, but also the US policies, imperialist policies in the Middle East, for example, are clearly having an enormous impact on women's lives, not only in the States, but also around the world. So we are not just striking against Trump, we are striking for a better world. We are trying to change the situation much more radically, because we don't want to go back to the status quo. So our idea is not, we don't want to get rid of Trump to then go back to the status quo, a status quo, for example, represented by Hillary Clinton's candidacy. This would have not solved the problem. So we really are emphasizing that we are against Trump, but also well beyond Trump.
I mean, basically the big problem, political problem that we've had in the United States forever, but especially over the last 50 years, it's become more pronounced that politics in the United States is effectively divided between two oligarchic parties who struggle in different ways for similar things. So in Barack Obama, the American empire had its most inventive apparition. Smiling face, kind face, not a white face, etc., but who did awful things despite that. With Trump, they have their most awful apparition, you know, both in the way he looks, the rhetoric, etc. But in concrete terms, many of the same things are being done. The Mexican Wall was Clinton's idea. The attack on unregistered migrants began some time before and was accelerated by Obama. So effectively, what you're challenging is American foreign policy and social and domestic policies from the last 50 years, more or less since the Reagan consensus, which changed everything.
Exactly, and I would like to quote my friend and colleague Nancy Fraser, who speaks about, to refer to what you were saying about Obama's candidacy, she speaks about progressive neoliberalism, which is precisely neoliberal policies and also aggressive imperialist foreign policies, but with a smile, so with a happy face, and of course this is particularly dangerous for a feminist movement, Because one of the things that happen with progressive neoliberalism is that we have an increasing phenomenon of cooptation of some elements of feminist discourse or LGBTQ rights. So Obama is the president who deported most immigrants. So when we oppose the Muslim ban or Trump on immigration, we should also remember that for 8 years, Obama has kept deporting millions of immigrants. But at the same time, Obama also supported the LGBT rights, women's rights. So we have a danger here, which is that of the cooptation of feminist and sexual liberation discourse, at least part of it, by neoliberal forces. So this is why we are really insisting on the fact that the kind of feminism, for example, represented by Hillary Clinton, is not a response to anybody. So it is certainly a response to upper middle class women, white women in the States, but it leaves behind working class migrant women, Muslim women, so the women of color, so the women who suffer the most from neoliberal policies. And so we need to reappropriate and to reclaim what feminism means in this sense. And you're right, so this entails autonomy in opposition to this kind of neoliberal policies, both carried out by the Democratic Party and by the Republican Party.
Cinzia, how many people do you think will show up in the United States for this? Hundreds of thousands? Millions?
We don't know, and we cannot predict, because something different also compared to the Women's March is the fact that this is really grassroots organizing. So this is a coalition of radical forces, of radical social collectives, and already a success of what we are doing is the fact that these are kind of grassroots of organizing that usually doesn't have much visibility on mainstream media in the society at large. And with the Women's Strike, we are actually managing to have visibility and therefore to put forward our very radical platform, even on mainstream media. But we cannot really predict how many people will take to the streets and how many people will actually strike, because from the viewpoint of workplace strike, of course, we have to face the problem of extremely bad labor laws. I guess the United States have probably the worst labor laws in among liberal democracies, in the sense that general and political strikes are forbidden, and most of contracts have no strike clauses. So unions really face the risk of huge fines if they call for strikes. So we have to take into account this. At the same time, what we are seeing is that, for example, some schools are closing. So it is not technically a strike, but they're closing because they think that a lot of employees may actually not show up, for example, call sick. And this is expanding over the course of the day. So we will see, but it is clearly unpredictable, because what we are doing is, in a sense, really a social and political experiment. So we cannot predict the outcomes.
Well, our fingers are crossed. Let's hope there will be a big turnout on Wednesday. Cinzia, moving to Italy for a minute, because you've been extremely active, still are active, whenever you return in Italian politics. Let's first discuss the differences between Italy and the United States. I mean, Italy probably had the largest social movements in Europe, some years ago. And yet these movements rose, they were very positive, massive turnouts, and then they just more or less disappeared. Not completely, but compared to what they were. Why did that happen?
It really has very much to do with the cooptation of the radical political forces that were key to the growth of the social movements, and particularly Rifondazione Comunista, by the Democratic Party and by center-left forces. So the decisive moment of decline of both the political left and social mobilization has been the moment in which Fausto Bertinotti decided to join the Prodi government. And this has caused a real disaster for the real destruction of the Italian left. The disappearance after 2 years from the parliament of socialist and communist forces. And this was the first time this happened after World War II. So it is the first time in the history of the Italian Republic that this happened. And also I think that this sudden U-turn taken by Rifondazione had a demoralizing effect on all the social forces that had mobilized over the course of the years. Of course, this I think is the main reason. Of course, it is not the only reason. One other reason has to do with the fact that we had in Italy really probably the largest mobilizations both against the war and against globalization.
And against NATO, by the way.
And against NATO, with millions of people taken to the streets. The problem is that we didn't win anything. So that this didn't really manage to have an impact on internal policies. So in terms, for example, of labor relations, we didn't win. We didn't win on Italy's participation in the wars in Afghanistan or in Iraq. We didn't win in terms of women's rights. So, of course, this impermeability of the political system with regard to social demands and social pressure is also one of the main reasons why, at a certain point, demoralization takes place.
But Cinzia, I mean, this is all true, but at the same time, separate from the old left, far left, Marxist left, the traditional left that Italy knew so well, leaving them aside, the anger, alienation people felt, especially young people, with successive Italian governments, and not just Berlusconi, but also Renzi, led to the emergence of the Five Star Movement, which is a strange mix. You know, the large numbers of people normally who would vote for the left, come to the left, went there because they said all these political parties are the same. And today in Italy, which we don't have in the United States, and that's the big difference, I think, also, that however weak or confused an alternative, it does exist. I mean, in two large cities, in Rome and in Torino, in Turin, you have mayors of the Five Star Movement, both women, elected, and one of them, the one in Turin, is very popular, the one in Rome less so. But you feel something changing. Now, to what extent it changes, I don't know, but something is there. Whereas in the United States, on the political front, you had the Sanders campaign, but there's nothing compared to Five Star or even the French left.
So, of course, this has to do with the different electoral system and political system, and the Italian political system is, of course, more unstable in a sense, which is a good thing. I want to insist on this because usually, especially center-left forces insist on the issue of stability of Italian governments, but stability really means stability for capitalism.
Yeah, so, and less democracy.
And less democracy, absolutely. So clearly there is a huge difference. Now, Five Stars movement. I'm actually quite critical of Five Stars movement for a number of reasons. First of all, just to dispel any misunderstanding, I do think that the demonization of Five Stars movement as a right-wing populist party comparable to UKIP or to Front National doesn't make any sense. So this doesn't grasp the reality. This is not what Five Stars movement is, and also all the worries about losing democracy if Five Stars movement goes to the government are really hypocritical, because if there is a party that is the most responsible for shrinking democracy in Italy, it is the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party, in particular, Renzi and now Gentiloni, who is just a proxy for Renzi, are the ones who are destroying Italian democracy, not Five Stars Movement. That said, I don't think that Five Stars Movement can be the alternative, and for a number of reasons. First of all, Five Stars Movement has a very hierarchical organization, and it is not a grassroots organization, an activist organization. Of course, they did organize a campaign against the constitutional reform, but this campaign was all centered around the members of the parliament, and it was not social mobilization. They do not have a culture of social mobilization at all. They are even quite hostile, especially Grillo, to unions and labor organizing. So this is the first problem. They also have quite contradictory politics, for example, on immigration. And even on welfare, they have some good positions on welfare, but again, their discourse makes complete abstraction from class. So class doesn't really exist, and class divisions are not a concern. And the main identity of the movement is the struggle against corruption. So the struggle against the corruption of what they call the political caste and the political system. But of course, you cannot govern only on this basis, only on honesty. And what is happening in Rome is quite indicative of the problem, because Virginia Raggi, the mayor of Rome, has been involved in the past weeks in a series of scandals concerning, if not corruption, at least lack of transparency. And this is causing enormous problems to Five Stars Movement. Another problem has to do with Raggi's decision to support and to give the okay to the building of a new stadium in Rome, which will have an enormous environmental impact. This again is causing enormous problems to Five Stars Movement, because environmentalism is one of their main key points, political points. So there is actually an insurrection of the activists against Raggi at the moment. So I don't know. The last polls I checked, the Democratic Party is still the first party with 30%, unfortunately, and Five Stars Movement is the second with 26%. And this may have to do precisely with these difficulties that are happening in Rome, in the sense that they are losing increasingly credibility. Especially in terms of capacity of governing, like capacity of actually governing the country. So I would be very cautious in thinking that Five Stars Movement is going to save us, or is going to be the alternative or the solution. I don't think that this will actually happen.
No, but I mean, even though it's not a proper alternative in the sense of having a complete set of progressive policies, the point I was making is that they broke the political system.
Yes.
And that it's very difficult to do in the United States. I mean, people have been trying, for ages, and they haven't even succeeded on the state level. I mean, we have one very radical councillor, Savant, in Seattle, who's a very nice person, who's very active, very militant. But even there, it's one local councillor amongst, a sea of Democrats or Republicans. And this is something that the left tends to ignore. They accept the system as it is. And so the lesser evil politics becomes very dominant, especially at times of elections. And do you think there's any chance that the Sanders forces, who were probably the most progressive collective of people who assembled for many, many years in the United States, certainly since the 60s and 70s, have the capacity to create some new political formation of whatever sort?
Okay, so this is a very complicated matter. First of all, I entirely agree with you. Something that is really puzzling for me, coming from Europe, is that it is very rare that social movements here have precise political demands concerning the reform of the electoral system. And this is actually key. I was thinking after the election in November, given that Clinton actually won the popular vote of 2,700,000 votes, I think, something like this. I was thinking that one of the first demands that would be raised would be precisely that of a reform of the electoral system, because clearly the situation is absurd. Again, I don't think Clinton would have been a good alternative to Trump, but it is absurd that the candidate who wins the popular vote doesn't govern, is not the president. So I do think that we would need to start a conversation among social forces to reject the current political system as some sort of dogma or natural fact that cannot be challenged. That said, within the current system, clearly there is a problem for Sanders forces. I actually would hope that they decided to break with the Democratic Party. I do think that we would need a left political organization, autonomous and alternative to the Democratic Party in the States, and this is crucial. I'm not sure that they are planning to do this in the near future. I don't think so. So what we could do is then to try to create the social conditions for this, which means clearly the creation of a new party needs also needs a transformation in terms of social mobilization and radicalization of the society at large. So clearly what social movements can do now is to try to create the conditions for challenging the political system.
Just one last thing, Cinzia, again on Italy. It was very interesting that a paper which is, the voice of neoliberalism in the world, The Economist, was against the referendum in Italy, or it was for voting against because they said these are dangerous authoritarian powers that would accumulate to Renzi, and while Renzi is fine, what if Grillo came or someone else who used the same powers? So it wasn't just inside Italy, but even outside, that some forces thought that Renzi had gone too far.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. And by the way, there was the paradoxical situation during the campaign for the referendum and against the referendum was that at a certain point the vote in support of the constitutional reform became a vote against the Five Stars movement and the danger of far-right forces. But the paradox of the situation is that if the reform had passed, we wouldn't have any guarantee that in 5 years it's not the Northern League or some other far-right force to win the election and govern, and in that case they would have had an enormous power in the parliament. Basically, they would have had the possibility of having a crushing majority in the parliament and passing all sorts of laws. So this was a paradox of the discussion. I must also say that The Economist was right in being worried, in the sense that Renzi's project doesn't come out of the blue. And behind Renzi's constitutional reform there was Giorgio Napolitano, the former president of Italy, of the Republic. And this constitutional reform represented really the highest moment of a decades-long campaign to erode parliamentary democracy in Italy. There has always been an authoritarian project in Italy, and the paradox is that this authoritarian project is now embodied, especially by Renzi's Democratic Party. And by authoritarian means...
Yeah, a Democratic Party which once used to be the Italian Communist Party, which suffered a great deal after the Second World War in not being permitted even to share power. It was pushed aside, and now it behaves exactly like those people who were treating it in that way after the war. But that's how the world functions. Cinzia, thank you very much. Best of luck for Wednesday, and we shall speak again, I hope.
Thank you. Have a nice day.